Some wonderful minds who did some great things this past semester at Kirkwood High, and with regard to the Kirkwood Call, which is now what, 102 years old?
Yep, this will be our 102nd year.
Yeah, well, that's quite a legacy, and if anything, to read about your experiences during COVID, to listen to your experiences during COVID, I think will be another thing for history's sake, but I think people right now will be fascinated. Mitch, Mr. Eden,
Yeah.
I would love for you to give us an overview of when the shoe dropped and you knew you had to go into another mode. If you do that for us.
Sure. So with us today, Maddie and Emma were two of the 4 editors-in-chief of the Kirkwood Call. And Lindsay was one of the 4 editors-in-chief of the Pioneer Yearbook. So in the beginning of March, I would say we started to get the COVID news kind of creeping into the United States. And we kind of had a feeling we would all be on an extended spring break. I don't think any of us anticipated we would be gone for the year. But I did think we all kind of knew we might be gone more than a week. So let's take our materials, let's have a little plan, and let's get ready. And I was meeting with these 3 and the other leaders of each of the programs to be prepared. But once we left March 13th for spring break, we never came back. We got news toward kind of the end of our spring break that we would be gone an extra 2 or 3 weeks. And then, during that time, everything escalated so quickly that I think it was about maybe a month after spring break that they announced school was out for the year. So the leadership teams of both media programs really had to continue doing what they do from their bedrooms. And they did this via our communication channel, Slack. And they really did it with passion and energy and organization. I know I had many staffers say it was like we weren't even gone because of these 3 and their peers. They just did an amazing job. And they also realized the importance of recording what was historic and making sure that was preserved, in a hardbound annual, the Pioneer, but also making sure that the breaking news that was coming out of Kirkwood High School and the Kirkwood School District was updated constantly on our social media and on our website. And then, go ahead.
No, continue.
I was the last thing I would add is, once the second week of April hit and kind of they were finished with the senior magazine and the yearbook, these 3, along with some other senior editors, got together and produced a collaborative COVID issue in which they profiled 19 people in the Kirkwood community who were directly and indirectly affected by this pandemic. And it was pretty special to watch these guys do that.
Congratulations. It's an extraordinary feat. I am sure one aspect of this, watching your screens or being one with your screens was nothing new in the bedroom. Putting out a newspaper and a yearbook, now that's something different. Can you talk about the moments when you knew you had to pivot to this new way of doing things in order to get the paper out, in order to get the yearbook out? Lindsay, go ahead first.
All right, sure. Well, to get the yearbook out, normally there's a lot of that in-class communication, and it's a lot about just working with teams to figure out like how we can make the spreads the best that they can be. And once we realized we weren't going back, we realized, okay, first off, we need to figure out a new way of communicating with everybody, because we can always check in, and it's harder to communicate over the phone. You don't know exactly what's going on. without seeing each other in person. And then secondly, it was our spring sports had been cut off and we didn't have any coverage. It was maybe a week or two into the spring sports. So we realized we had to cut half of those pages and make room for all of this COVID news to make sure that we were documenting that. So that was a huge pivot for us.
Maddie?
Yeah, like Mr. Eden was saying, like it was very unexpected. I remember Emma and I and two of our other EICs were sitting in the office like on Friday the 13th, the last day of school. And we were like, okay, trying to plan out our calendars, picking days if we had to meet, kind of what we were doing. But we were all thinking like, oh, we're not going to have to do this. Like, we'll see each other again. Like, it's no worry. And then I remember I went with a group of friends to Florida, and that was kind of when they were announcing that we weren't going to come back for a few weeks. And then from there, I was like, if they're not having us come back for a few weeks, I don't think we're coming back at all. And that's when it really hit me. And all four of us were texting, trying to figure out what to do. But at least for us, it was our senior magazine that we had to produce. And that's the easiest one to do because it's all feature-based. So we could just have people like contact students. And that was definitely, it was nice that we had that, but it was still definitely a pivot and a change because writers had to do all phone interviews, not in person. And we had to teach people who had never designed before how to do design virtually. So that was definitely a challenge, but everyone really stepped up and put like 110% in. So it ended up being really great in the end.
Emma. Thank you. Emma.
Yeah, I think it was fitting that the last day of school was Friday the 13th. Like Maddie said, we were all sitting in the office kind of just making a very long Google Doc of all these alternative plans we could have. We had a meeting in the conference room with our editorial board, and we decided to put together a COVID team to cover it for over spring break in the last quarter of school. And I was on spring break in Chicago, and I was one of the people that was sort of designated at that time to sort of like just watch over it. And I remember I think I was texting with Havener and Townsend at one point, which are principals, just about what was going on and trying to make sure we were all staying up to date. And that was when I kind of realized, oh no, we're actually going to be gone for quite some time. And like Maddie said, we started firing off texts in our group chat, trying to figure out what we were going to do.
So, you know, maintaining those deadlines, of course, as good journalists do. What went into that from day to day? Can you talk about your editorial meetings and such, what you were going to cover, et cetera, et cetera?
I know our editorial board was meeting, once school was out, we were meeting over Zoom and just texting frequently over Slack. And we were splitting up just sort of all the stuff that we had to do that we couldn't regularly do in person, like teaching people how to virtually design, editing, copy, reaching out to seniors that we needed to cover for senior magazine, and then of course COVID. And we also had something going on with the school board at the time that we were also looking for people to cover. So that was our big thing that our editorial board was worrying about, just making sure that we were still covering everything just as well as we would have if we were in school.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I mean, just to add on to that, we were also really trying to maintain like as much normalcy as we could. So we still sent out like weekly agendas of what was going to happen. We still met. I believe it started to cut down as we like went on, but we still had like 7:50 a.m. meetings with half of the staff, and then meetings that were later in the day that matched up with the classes. And we still met with our editorial board every week. So we tried to keep like everything consistent, kind of like what we usually do, but it was definitely a challenge, especially just being at home, like people not wanting to get up and come on the computers. But it was really nice to still have that like face-to-face connection, like even though it was through a screen too.
That was the same with us as well. We did a lot of Zoom calls, and we had multiple a day just to keep connected and make sure we were all on the same page, because it's a lot harder to stay on the same page when people aren't working together like at the same place. So we did a lot of Zoom calls, and for me it just looked like sitting in bed working. We on like all day we had to work a lot harder because we had the last two deadlines, but we also had all of our like specialty designs, and it was harder to designate who was doing what on our editorial board. So even though we had those Zooms, we were all working so hard to make sure that everything was still perfect. But it was funny the difference that the in-class versus the Zoom call, because you would see everybody laying in bed, just like listening while they were half asleep because they were definitely going to go to bed back afterwards. But yeah, we definitely relied on that Zoom call heavily.
Mr. Eden, what was your oversight during this process? Can you explain where you stood, in the midst of all this, please?
Yeah, it kind of stayed the same. It was just a different communication tool. I really, during the school year, try to just stay in tune with my editors-in-chief and the editorial boards. So I kind of did the same thing during the e-learning process. It was just more via Zoom and our Slack channel and less in-person communication, which, that was the hard part. In person, you can't replace that energy and that just those casual conversations with my leadership team, just listening to them and offering advice. So it's much more scheduled and structured and more difficult in that regard. But these guys responded amazing. What they did was truly remarkable, how they stepped up and got everything together. And I know Kirkwood wasn't the anomaly. I heard from many advisors across the country that said the journalism was the one thing that the kids really threw themselves into during the pandemic, because it was authentic and it was real, and they felt like they were doing something that mattered. They were clarifying the facts that the school was releasing. They were keeping the community and the school up to date when things broke. So that was kind of a neat thing too, to see the value in what they were doing. And for Lindsay, that they just put, they created 16 pages of COVID coverage in a yearbook that's going to last forever. And 10 years from now, it's going to be hard to explain to people what it was like. So it was important to make sure that was a part of it.
Will you all be pursuing journalism?
I will not do.
Yeah, Emma and I both are, but Lindsay's not.
Yeah. So Lindsay, let me turn to you for a moment. You have this background now, an extraordinary experience doing journalism as it should be. I think with the kind of training you got there, I can make that statement. And under these extraordinary circumstances, oftentimes we say, even if one does not go into journalism as a career, journalism creates a foundation for other things. Do you see that as something that was a benefit for you?
Oh, yes, for sure. I feel like I learned how to be a leader through the journalism program. I feel like I learned how to communicate with others. I feel like I found myself in the journalism program, and going forward, I think I'll take the skills that I learned into anything that I do.
Those skills are transportable for sure.
Yeah.
And Maddie, what do you think about your skills now and where you want to go with them?
Well, journalism, like Lindsay said, definitely shaped me into who I am today, and gave me confidence to lead others and work with others. And I definitely want to do something with journalism in the future. I'm not 100% sure what I want to do, but I'm very interested in strategic communications and doing something with travel journalism, because I love traveling and taking photos around the world. So I'd love to do something combining that. And my minor is Spanish also, so that'll be a nice combo.
Yes. Emma, any words to say with regard to your skills at this point?
Well, sort of the same thing that Lindsay and Maddie said. The journalism program taught me how to be confident and be a leader and sort of take charge. And I'm forever grateful to what Kirkwood and Mr. Eden gave to me. And that's part of the reason why I'm majoring in journalism in college. And then I think I'm going to end up double majoring in history. So we'll see where that goes.
all good paths for the three of you, certainly. So, Mr. Eden, the reputation Kirkwood has had supporting First Amendment, the lack of censorship, which is wonderful, can't be said of all schools. What do you believe this journey so far, especially too with that overlay of the George Floyd killing? What message is there from this experience in particular,
So,
for your future journalism students?
right, and I think you began this question with the most important part. At Kirkwood High School, Dr. Michael Havener, our principal, is a strong advocate of the First Amendment, and he's a strong advocate for kids. And that can't be understated, that he trusts me, believes in me, and then I can turn to kids like Maddie, Lindsay, and Emma and believe in them and trust them. And giving them that empowerment to run a media program really allows them to gain those transferable skills. With what has transpired over the summer, now more than ever, kids need to have a healthy outlet to express themselves, to be a part of change, to be a part of this huge social movement, to feel like they have a voice that's going to be heard, because these are the future leaders of our country. And to give them that voice is such a powerful tool. And my kids already this summer are working on things for back to school that are going to help educate and spur positive discussion and hopefully ultimately spur change in not only the Kirkwood community, but I think that trickles out into other areas. So I'm very excited to get going again with the new crews who were mentored under these leaders here. And I'm just excited what they're going to be able to do with that voice that they're given at Kirkwood.
Well, these leaders before us right here set the stage for how it can be done and how it might continue, given we don't know when we'll be back. You know, it's a big question mark right now. And I didn't mention today is July 14th, and I do want to mention that as an historical point from the time we're talking and where we are with COVID, for heaven's sakes. So anyway, any other parting words that you might like to add to this commentary?
This is kind of like a side note, but this is just kind of a fun thing that our staff did. So every year there's a tradition of doing paper plate awards, where it's like we give every staffer a paper plate and we like draw something on it and say like most well-rounded, or there'll sometimes be kind of jokes and like different awards. And so we really wanted to keep that tradition this year because we'd been looking forward to doing that all year. So for call, I know Pioneer did it a little bit differently, but for the call, the four of us got in our cars. We were all in our separate cars, and over 3 days and I think 13 hours, we drove to every single staffer's house. And there's like about 70 to 80 of us. So we went house to house and like delivered the plates. But honestly, that was so nice just to get to see everyone. And then we put them all together, made a little video, sent it out to the staff. And that was just a really fun tradition that we still got to keep. So.
Very nice.
Yeah, for Pioneer it was really similar. We did the paper plates online via Zoom, but Mr. Eden got us these yard signs that said "More Than a Pioneer" on it, which was like our opening slogan because our theme was "More Than," and we got to put the opening and closing in our front yards and it was just something to be proud of. And we got to go around to all of our staffers and put them in our yards. And we also had that virtual banquet as well. So we were continuing to celebrate our accomplishments, even though we're in our home celebrating. So, yeah.
Emma, anything?
I was just going to mention, because I don't think anyone had yet, but especially Lindsay put a lot of work in to this magazine. We collaborated as a newspaper and yearbook, and we made a special edition of a COVID magazine. And it was all surrounding the virus and all interviews with people in the community. And Maddie and I wrote stories with a bunch of other senior editors. And I know Lindsay and 2 other editors designed the entire thing for us, and it looked great.
You spoke to this notion of collaboration, and much of media is a collaborative process, and certainly you have again proven that in terms of how you collaborated and also how you became vehicles for public service, and I'm sure in turn the community has valued that. And so I want to say congratulations on jobs well done. On behalf of the St. Louis Press Club, I want to wish you well in your journeys going forward, and thank you for your time. And Mr. Eden, job well done. Another year, but it was an extraordinary year for sure.
Thank you very much for having us. And I'd just like to end with the upcoming year. There's going to be a lot of uncertainty, a lot of roller coaster ups and downs. But what an incredible opportunity for the journalism kids at every high school to be the source of news for not only their school but their community, and to take this as an opportunity and a challenge rather than a time to complain and feel sorry for ourselves. So I think these guys set the tone for that, and I know the new crews are really ready to do that.
I'll just say indeed. Absolutely. Thank you all. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.